Hello everyone! Thank you so much for joining this session on what's new in .NET Desktop. My name is Olia Gavrysh. I'm a senior program manager working at Microsoft, and I'm focusing on desktop platforms such as WPF, WinForms, .NET MAUI, and porting experience from .NET Framework to the latest .NETs. And in this session, I'll talk about new features in every of those platforms, and we're gonna start with the latest .NET version .NET 6 that was recently released in November of the last year. Then we also have a new version of Visual Studio 2022 with all the great tooling improvements. Then we're gonna deep dive into new features of WPF and WinForms, and I'll tell you about the new offering that we are currently working on that allows you to create desktop and mobile applications for different platforms. These apps can be deployed on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android. And at the end, I'll tell you about Blazor that allows you to build a hybrid web and desktop applications. So let's get started. We're gonna start with .NET. Very briefly, I'll tell you about .NET 6. So what is .NET 6? What is .NET? You probably know that we had many different .NETs. We had .NET Framework, .NET Core, Mono Xamarin. We also had .NET Standard, not the framework, but something to target your applications. And we heard the feedback that it's too many different options. It's super confusing. So we decided to take the best parts of each platform and combine it to one platform that is simply called .NET. And .NET is the future platform. That's the platform going forward that will receive all the updates, all the language improvements, and I highly recommend to upgrade to this platform. And .NET 5 was the first version. Now we're on .NET 6, and moving forward it'll be .NET 7, .NET 8, and so on. So .NET allows flexible deployment, meaning that you can have different versions of .NET on the same machine. You can choose for each application which version of .NET to target. That way you're no longer afraid of breaking changes when you update the framework. If something doesn't work, you can very easily switch back to previous .NET. It has very good performance. I actually have a slide for performance. Here you can see Tech and Power performance comparison with Java and Node.js. And you can see that .NET 6 Web Framework, ASP.NET Core, still over 10 times faster than Node.js. And we also worked a lot on Entity Framework Core. We heard that feedback, that it's important for you, and we improved EF Core on .NET 6 92% faster than .NET 5. So all those performance gains you're just getting by simply updating to the latest .NET framework. And .NET is very popular. We have 5.4 million active users in Visual Studio family. .NET Core and .NET 5 ranks #1 as the most loved framework according to Stack Overflow surveys in 3 consecutive years, starting from 2019. And our open source repo, github.com/.net, is in top 30 highest velocity OSS projects since 2017. We also received so much help from open source community. We have about 7,000 contributors and over 21,000 contributions, PRs that those contributors submitted. So if you're interested in becoming a contributor, please go ahead to any open source .NET repository that you're passionate about, and every one of them has a tag up for grabs or easy first bug for tasks and issues. So if you see that task, that's something we're looking for your help, feel free to pick it up, create a pull request, submit it. We'll work with you. Our team will do the API review. We accept your changes and your code will become a part of .NET. That's also something to put on your resume, right? How cool is that? I wrote WPF, or I wrote the .NET MAUI, the new multi-platform .NET framework. Like, my code is used by millions and millions of people. So please help us. We really appreciate your participation, your feedback, and yeah. .NET 6 is released. It's unified command-based library and SDK, industry-leading performance, as I said. It has simplified development. You'll notice that now you need less lines to achieve same things. We simplified the templates as well. We have new C# and F# features, C# 10, F# 6. Apple Silicon support, ARM64 is there, and .NET 6 is long-term version. Very quickly about long-term version, or LTS, long-term support. Every year we're gonna release a new .NET. We've heard the feedback that the way we were doing it before, when we were releasing whenever we had something to release, that was not convenient for you because it was hard for you to plan. So now we're gonna release every November, and every other version will be LTS, long-term support, meaning that we're gonna support it for 3 years. 1 year we're gonna be innovating, implementing new features. The other year will be stabilizing. If you don't like updating too much, you can jump from LTS to LTS, just update every 3 years. But if you want to get the latest features, update every year and be on the latest stack of technology. All right, also we released Visual Studio 2022 that has so many great features for desktop developers. It's hot reload and XAML live preview that I'm gonna show you in my demo. It has IntelliCode improvements such as whole line completion, suggestions for common code refactoring on the fly. It has built-in Git and GitHub integration to clone repos, manage work items and pull requests, and automatically set up CI/CD workflows to GitHub Actions and Azure. And VS 2022 is the first 64-bit version of Visual Studio, so it can take advantage of the full power of your dev box to work on projects of any size and scale. So go to visualstudio.com and download it today. Give it a try. You know, I was recently talking to my friend from like many years ago. We used to be developers on the same project in Ukraine. So he has so many years of experience. And I asked him, like, how do you like Visual Studio 2022? And he told me, you know, I didn't try. I'm still on an older version of Visual Studio. I'm like, oh, why? You didn't like it? I'm like, no, I have so much workload right now. And I'm afraid that if I install Visual Studio, the latest one, and something doesn't work, then I need to uninstall it. I need to install the previous one, and it will take time. And I'm like, wait, do you know that you can run multiple Visual Studios? You can have different versions of VS on the same machine side by side. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I have like 5 of them. Well, npm I need to test like nightly builds and preview versions, GA, but it's totally fine to have your VS that you're working on, get the latest one, try it. If you don't like it, just close it, go back to the previous one, but don't miss out on the latest tooling. It's handy, it's great. So yes, don't be like my friend. And with that, let's deep dive into new features of WPF. And I want to just start with a demo. Let me open Visual Studio and show you all the features in action. I'm gonna remove myself so I'm not in the way for the code. And here I have a WPF application that shows you air quality in different cities. Recently, over the last few years, we had some disaster with fires, and air quality at times was very bad, so we had to close all windows and don't go outside. That inspired me to write this program to see what is the air quality in my city. And this is a demo app. I have my MVVM model. I have a data binding. So this is how I'm getting like text for short description, for cities, etc. And what do I see in the designer? I see nothing. I see nothing because my data is coming from data binding. So to see how my application will look like, I need to run my app. Well, sometimes it's not handy to start and stop your applications. Or other times my data layer, for example, is developed by some other coworker who is having tea right now and haven't done his job yet. So I want to move forward. I don't have data in my database, but I still want to develop my UI. For these cases, we have a new feature that is called design time data. With design time data, you can add dcolumn to any property of your XAML, and you'll get the property that you set in your UI immediately in the designer. This is a mock data, so when you run your application, it would not be there. It has no effect on your real app. So if you mock some data for testing purposes, don't be afraid to check it in production. Nobody will see it. It's just the thing you see in the designer. And you can do dcolumn text, dcolumn background. In my case, I went further and I mocked the entire item source. And here I have my cities. Okay, perfect. So let me see. All right, I have AQI. That's the value, how bad is your weather. I have short description. And you know what? I'm kind of happy, but I would like this short description to pop. Well, for that, we have another new feature called quick actions. Do you see this light bulb next to the control? Yeah, that is a quick action. When I expand it, I can see the most commonly used properties for this specific control. So in my case, let's go and make it bold. Okay, does it look better? I think it looks better. Great. So now I'm happy with my UI. I'm gonna run my application. And once I'm running my app, let me bring the app to the screen. Okay, well here I don't see my data. So I guess there is an issue. I'm gonna debug it as it usually happens. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna debug it while my app is running. So I'm gonna put my app here and change my code and see the changes reflected immediately in my application. That is the feature called hot reload. But there's one more thing. It's very inconvenient to switch between running app and my code. I have only one demo screen. Yeah, it doesn't work for me. For that, we have another new feature called XAML Live Preview. You can access XAML Live Preview from here, from your running app. It's this camera sign, so I'm gonna click that. Or you can also search, just type in and search XAML Live Preview and it'll be there. So XAML Live Preview shows your running application. The window you can choose. If you have multiple windows here, you choose which window you want to show. It shows it exactly as your running app, but it is inside Visual Studio. It's a standard Visual Studio window that you can resize, dock, put wherever you want, and it's right next to your code. So now using one monitor is much, much better. Besides that, it has additional tooling for pixel perfect UI, such as, for example, rulers. And these are visual lines. Again, doesn't take effect on your code. It's just for designer purposes. So I can add those lines. I can see how far they are from left. I can see how far they're from right. I can move them around, make sure my positioning for every element, everything is aligned. I can change the color for those features. I can say I set up some like advanced ruler system, but then I'm not using it at the moment. I don't want to delete them, but I don't want to see that crazy grid. I can just hide them, then bring them back. There also is a selection of the element. And when you select the element, you get a short description of main parameters. Also, when you click on the element, you immediately go to the XAML related to this element. And if you don't want to see that much, some people got a feedback that, okay, they like clicking, they like that the area is highlighted, like you can really see where is the adorner for this element, but they don't want this all pop-up windows. You can very easily disable it. This one is show element info during selection, so I turned it off. Now I just select, I navigate to the code, but I don't get the pop-up. Right, so that is XAML Live Preview. It works for WPF, it also works for .NET MAUI. And using this XAML Live Preview, I'm gonna debug my code. Okay, so I'm not getting my data, and I assume I have some issues with data binding. Okay, yeah, in my item control, I'm missing item source. So let me quickly add this item source. Okay, and I'm gonna add binding and path. Oh, yep. Okay, and now, wouldn't it be nice if Visual Studio would suggest me the path? Because I have my MVVM here, all the structure is there. Yes, and now we added this MVVM IntelliSense. So to enable that, I just go here, and there is a suggestion right there for me, setting data context. Setting data context will enhance IntelliSense when working with data binding. All right, I can preview this change, and that's what it's gonna add. D-column data context, and it will set it to my design instance type view models main window view model. All right, I want to do that. I'm gonna continue editing, and now let me go back. Here, my path. Now let me remove and add. There you go. Now I have IntelliSense. And I immediately have my objects, my tiles with different cities. I see that in the running app. I see that in my XAML Live Preview. All right. Oh, another feature that I forgot to tell you about XAML Live Preview, it has zoom in, so I can zoom into my running app. Before, you couldn't do it with like real application, and I've heard the feedback from developers that sometimes to make sure everything is aligned, they had to take a screenshot and they had to open that screenshot in some graphic editor and zoom in. Now you can zoom in into your running app, and you can also use this fit height, fit widths. Excellent. Okay, so let me see. My app is great, but there is one thing. I don't know if you noticed. I probably like Los Angeles too much because every city is Los Angeles. Well, obviously it's an issue, and it seems that this time the issue is in C# code, not XAML code. So before I showed you XAML hot reload when I was editing XAML file and the changes were right there applied. Now I'm gonna go to my C# code. Okay, here I have some test code that just overrides every city to Los Angeles. Let me remove that and let me save it. And all right, now you can see that cities have been updated to the real cities. So what happened? That was a C# hot reload, and I just saved it. The changes were immediately applied because I have this hot reload on file save checkbox. So don't forget to check it. I really like having it checked. Maybe it should be by default on. Yeah. All right. So these are the features of WPF. We have a few more. And oh, by the way, as for Visual Studio, did you notice that my tabs have different color? Like this one is blue, this one is green. That is because I said we have a tab coloring. You can set it in your Visual Studio settings. I set color by different projects. You can also set their different options. And another cool thing that I personally really like is theming. So here, if we go to Tools, Theme, right? You can choose a theme here. You also can go to Get More Themes. And let me do that. Let me just show you very quickly. It opens the browser, and here we have so many different themes that were enabled together with our open source contributors. Okay, look at this. Winter is coming. What a beautiful theme. Love it. All right, let's go back to our slide deck. And let's quickly summarize what we have. So I showed you XAML Live Preview, a new feature that is available for WPF as well as .NET MAUI. We saw quick actions, the light bulb next to controls that lets you get access to the most used properties in just one click. We have a design time data and sample data. These are new features. I did not show you sample data, but just type into Google. I did not show you sample data, but just find it, read it up. It's described in our docs. It's the way how you can generate sample data. Visual Studio will automatically do it for you. If you want to see some like mock objects, you don't have to even create it manually. It will be done for you. We have XAML binding improvements. We have IntelliSense improvements for MVVM scenarios when I added that data context. XAML hot reload, C# hot reload, and updates. We updated WPF XAML designer for .NET Framework. So before we had two different designers for .NET Framework and the new one for .NET Core and .NET 5, .NET 6. The new one was out of proc designer. Now we updated .NET Framework applications to use the new designer as well. A new designer is better, it's more performant, it has the latest features. So now all new features of the designer are available for both .NET Core 5, 6, and so on, as well as .NET Framework applications. All right. Now let's move to the next part. What is new in WinForms? And in WinForms, we have so many new features as well as improvements. So we have application-wide default font that I'll show you in the demo. We have accessibility improvements, new data binding scenarios that we continuous working on, and high DPI fixes. And we're improving the designer. We have strip controls editing from the designer, such as menu strip, context menu strip, etc. We added it quite some time ago, but people keep asking me about it, so that's why I'm putting it here. Yes, it's already there in the latest designer. Check it out. We have reliability fixes. The latest version is much better, more reliable. We have multiple controls editing improvements. When you select like 20-30 controls and you want to move them all, before the experience was painful. Now it works. We have third-party controls SDK. We're continuously working with third-party control vendors such as Telerik, DevExpress, SyncFusion, Infragistic, ActivePro, and so many others. If you are a control vendor and you have any questions about the latest designer or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. It doesn't matter if you're large or if you're one developer company. I'm happy to work with you. I'm happy to explain everything, to give you access to our documentation, etc. So please reach out if you have any questions, suggestions, feedback. Everything is welcome. And what else did we improve? We improved designer load time, because before the .NET Core, the latest designer, it took some time to open the application for the first time. Now we do it in async mode, and we do it much faster. So let's talk about the new features in more details. And again, performance is the topic of the day, right? We improved performance so much compared to .NET Framework. Here you can see same actions, absolutely same application, just in the first window it's targeting .NET Framework 4.8, in the second window it targets .NET 6, and same operations take much less allocations. So we improved the mechanism of how we are rendering controls, and .NET 6 is way more performant. It saves you resources. Next, we have new controls. We have a task dialog that is a very advanced message box on steroids. And that feature is very exciting because it also was developed by our open source contributors. So we worked with the community to enable this feature. And the developer, Konstantin Preiser, he just created a suggestion, created pull request, went through review cycles with our team, and his code is now in WinForms. And it's absolutely amazing. I played with this feature a lot. It basically allows you to show your users anything you want in a task dialog form. Another new control that we added for both WinForms and WPF is Webview 2. And Webview 2 is the new web browser, like the next version of it, and it's using Chromium-based engine. And it's distributed as a NuGet package, so to add it to your project, you just go to NuGet, you install Microsoft web.webview2, and it appears in your toolbox, and then you use it like regular control. You can drag and drop it, it's in properties, and with that, I'm sure you guys know what is web browser, but you can show the web content in your desktop application, WinForms or WPF, which many people find very useful. All right, now to accessibility improvements. We are making WinForms applications more accessible to more users, and that is one of our big goals. In .NET 6, we improved the way how assistive technologies such as narrator or text automation can interact with the controls. And in WinForms, we do it via adding UIA providers to the controls. That way, narrator, for example, can interact with those providers. In .NET 6, we added UIA providers for checklist box, linked label, panel, scroll bar, tab control, taskbar, etc. We also improved narrator announcements in data grid view, error provider, list view. We improved keyboard tooltips. We added keyboard tooltips for the tab controls, tab page, and tree views, tree node. And we improved color contrast in the following controls: checklist box, data grid view, label, property grid view, toolstrip button. So here you can see WinForms applications becoming more accessible, which is extremely important nowadays. And we're trying to keep the very high quality bar in this matter. Then high DPI fixes. Yes, WinForms in .NET framework suffered a lot on high resolution monitors, and we are fixing this problem. In .NET Core it's better, in .NET 6 it's much better. In this release we made some progress in supporting per monitor v2 mode, and we create controls in the same DPI awareness as the application. We correctly scale container control and MDI child windows in per monitor v2 mode in most scenarios. And you can see, like, on the left side, that's .NET 5. On the right side, .NET 6 looks much, much better. All right, simplified experience. That's something I talked about when I was talking about .NET 6. But now, basically, you need less lines to create same experiences. In .NET 6 and C# 10, we brought a lot of simplifications to the way how we write code, and of course we support all those changes in our desktop platforms. WinForms support implicit usings and file scope namespaces, so the code looks less busy and easier to read. Again, on the left side, .NET 5 and .NET 6. Here you can see that we no longer need, let me zoom in. Let me go back and zoom in. There you go. So here we have usings for system, system collection, system link queue, etc., etc. Thanks to the feature implicit usings, we no longer need it. We also, here you can see namespace template. We have this brace, and here we just say namespace, template, semicolon, and we no longer need this curly. We move everything one level to the left, which looks less busier. I personally really like it. Okay, also simplified templates. Before we had, when you type .NET New in console, that's all the options, all the suggestions that you're gonna get. A lot. Now, when you type .NET New, that's all you're gonna get. ASP.NET, Blazor, Class Library, Console, WinForms, and WPF. All the templates from before, they're still there. So if you want, you can create them from the console. They're not going anywhere, but for getting started experience, we received the feedback that when people see all that monstrosity of the list, they're getting really lost, and it's not convenient for them to see all those options. So we simplified it to the most essential applications. Okay, and remember I told you about the new default font? I want to show you how to use this new API. So here I have a WinForms app, and like long time ago, we had our default font that was Microsoft Sans Serif, right? And then Windows updated the default font to Sequoia UI, and for quite some time we had the old font for WinForms because we were on .NET Framework, we didn't want to break anybody. Of course, people were complaining they wanted the modern Sequoia UI font, so when we created .NET Core, we updated the default font. But then, those applications that were developed for the previous font and that has the pixel perfect UI, now with the new font, did not look so good. So other customers started yelling at us and say, like, what did you do? You break my app. Like, go back. So now we enabled the API that allows you to set default font all over your application with just one line of code, and that would set the font of all the controls that were not overwritten by you explicitly to whatever font you set there. So let me open Visual Studio. Let me zoom into it. And here you can see in the project file, I can just write application default font and set it to whichever font I prefer. By the way, this one is very curly. That's the default font for all your app, and this way it also changes the font in your designer. You also can use the API itself. So in main, you can call application.setDefaultFont, and I need to add this. Yep. But this is how you can call the setDefaultFont directly. But this way, without project file, we'll change font only in the running app. In the designer, you'll keep the old font. So instead of this option, I recommend doing this one. Just change it in the project file and it's done. It's in the designer, it's in the runtime. Okay, unfortunately, time flies fast, so I need to move forward so I have enough time to tell you about the latest offerings in desktop world. But yeah, we have a blog posts, actually a few of them on our .NET blog dedicated to the latest features in WinForms. So if you're curious about it, go ahead, check them out. And let's move forward to how you can upgrade your .NET applications from previous .NETs to the latest one. Well, there are two options. If you are on .NET Core, upgrading to .NET 6 is extremely easy. Let me open back Visual Studio, and here I'm on .NET 6, but same. You're doing right-click on your project, you choosing properties, and there is a combo box, target framework. So here, if you're on .NET Core, it will have .NET Core, you open it, you choose .NET 6 or whichever version you want, click, rebuild, you're done, you upgraded. And we have some breaking changes, and that's the place where you can read about them. It's docs, microsoft.com.net, Core Compatibility /6.0. And here you can find the APIs that have changed. It starts as ASP.NET Core. If you're curious about WinForms or WPF, just go to that part. But we're trying to make our next frameworks very compatible to the previous ones. So between .NET Core, .NET 5, and .NET 6, there are very, very little changes. And everything that is described here, it usually would not affect you. There are minor things, but your code is still gonna work. So most likely you will have a very, very easy experience of upgrading. If you are on .NET Framework, it's a slightly different story. In this case, we have a tool that will help you and do the migration process for you. And this tool is called Upgrade Assistant. And it reduces time and difficulty modernizing older .NET code bases. It provides a guided step-by-step experience, supports multiple project types, C# and VB.NET languages, and it will help you to upgrade to .NET 6. So you can get this tool at aks.ms/.net upgrade assistant. And run it. It's very simple. If you have any questions, there is a documentation, there are videos on how to use it. If you're still having questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you. And there are few unsupported app types that are ASP.NET Web Forms. In this case, we recommend using Blazor or Razor Pages. Server-side WCF is not supported moving forward, and we recommend to consider Web APIs, gRPC, or Core WCF. and remoting. For remoting, consider Stream JSON RPC, gRPC, or Web APIs. We also have a tool called Portability Analyzer that will just give you a report and show how compatible your app is to .NET 6. So if you're just considering porting to .NET, but you probably want to talk to your boss, you want to do like a the case study, you can use this tool, get the report with the percentage, with green and red color, bring it to your manager and justify how much work you will need to do and what kind of work in which areas you will need to do any updates, if any, to move to .NET 6. All right. Now let's talk about Maui. Maui is the evolution of Xamarin Forms, designed to help you deliver high-performance cross-platform native desktop and mobile apps all from a single code base. And .NET MAUI under the hood uses technologies out there today for building native apps on Windows with WinUI, Mac Catalyst for macOS, and of course iOS and Android. And .NET MAUI abstracts all those frameworks into a single framework built on .NET 6. So .NET MAUI on Windows supports WinUI, allowing these apps to use all the newest native features and supported versions of Windows 10. And that means that you can build all these apps for any device from a single code base and project system. And instead of learning different stacks and languages for each, you can use one language, one set of libraries, and one UI stack for all of them. And it will release in May. We will have the first version. We are in the beginning of creating this application. So yeah, it's still not stable. We're adding features, we're listening to feedback, but that is the next thing we're gonna work on. We're working on currently. So if you want to see, if you want to be the first one who sees it, it's available already. It's in the preview, so you can go ahead, download it, and it's available since Visual Studio 17.1 Preview 1 and all later Visual Studios. So check it out. And at the end, I wanted to talk about hybrid apps with Blazor and .NET MAUI. So we first supported Blazor on the server, then in the browser with WebAssembly. And now we're extending it again so you can write Blazor hybrid apps. This means you can create hybrid client apps which combine web and native UI together in a single native client application. And it primarily targeted at web developers that want to provide rich client and offline experience for their users. So if you're a web developer, you want to build a desktop app, you don't need to learn new technology, you can keep being a web developer, and now you can put your web inside desktop application. Blazor hybrid app is built on top of .NET MAUI. So that is .NET MAUI and Webview 2, the control that I told you about before, and your web inside that Webview 2 inside .NET MAUI. And the scenarios will also be supported when .NET MAUI releases early next year. So now it's also in the preview, but you already can see it working already. And all right, that's it for today. It's a lot of material and we have way more features. Unfortunately, I don't have time for everything, but we have a great documentation. We have .NET blog where we talk about all the latest things. I also tweet about it constantly, so feel free to subscribe to my Twitter. And if you have any questions, any suggestions, any recommendations for us, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk to you. And with that, get the latest .NET 6, get the latest Visual Studio, use Upgrade Assistant to move your applications to .NET 6 if you have not done that yet, and enjoy coding. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.